I stood in the ruins of what used to be my father's woodworking shop, staring at the contract on the table while my family looked at me like I was their last lifeline. My mother's mascara ran down her cheeks in black rivers, my sister Bella's perfectly manicured hands trembled, and my father sat collapsed in his chair like a broken marionette. They were begging me to save them from the disaster they had created. The same people who had pushed me into a glass cabinet 6 months ago and told me to clean up my own blood were now asking for mercy. If you want to hear how I went from being the family scapegoat to the one holding all the cards, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever had to walk away from toxic like every family. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The night everything changed started with applause. It was the annual church fundraiser in our small New England town, one of those events where everyone dressed up and pretended their lives were perfect. The venue was the old stone church on Maple Street, built in 1847, with its soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. I had spent 6 weeks planning this event, working late into the night after my day shifts at the local library, where I shelved books for minimum wage and handed over every penny to my parents. I had transformed the church fellowship hall into something magical. Ivory linens draped every table, and I had hand-painted gold leaf designs on each one, a painstaking process that had left my fingers cramped and aching. The centerpieces were my pride and joy, crafted from reclaimed barnwood I had sanded and stained myself, arranged with dried lavender baby's breath and cream-colored roses I had negotiated from the florist in exchange for designing her daughter's birthday party for free. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling like captured stars, and I had created a focal wall using hundreds of paper flowers I had folded during my lunch breaks over the past month. Every detail had been planned, every corner perfected. I had even designed the programs, printing them at the library after hours when no one would notice the extra paper usage. The event had raised $15,000 for the church's community outreach program, triple what they had raised the year before. Pastor Thompson had been ecstatic. During the closing remarks, Pastor Thompson gripped the podium with both hands, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "Before I dismiss everyone tonight," he said, his voice carrying through the microphone, "I need to acknowledge someone very special. Clara Miller, would you please stand?" My breath caught in my throat and a cold wave of panic rippled through my chest. I was sitting at the back table, the one I had deliberately chosen because it was partially hidden behind a support column. My mother Eleanor sat 3 tables away with my father Richard, both of them dressed in their Sunday best. Bella was at the head table with her fiancé Julian Croft, a man whose family owned half the commercial real estate in our county and the neighboring one. She wore a sapphire dress that cost more than I made in 3 months, a gift from Julian's mother. I stood slowly, my hands shaking my cream-colored dress, suddenly feeling too simple, too plain compared to everyone else's finery. It was a dress I had sewn myself from fabric I found on clearance, spending hours making sure every stitch was perfect, because I knew my mother would inspect it and find fault if I didn't. "This young woman," Pastor Thompson continued, "is the reason tonight has been such a tremendous success. Clara designed every element you see around you, from the decorations to the programs in your hands. She has a gift, a true gift for creating beauty. Many of you may not know that Clara has been volunteering her talents for our church for years, never asking for recognition or compensation. Tonight I want to publicly thank her and present her with this certificate of appreciation." The applause started tentative at first, then growing. Mrs. Henderson, a widow in her 70s who always smelled like lavender and baked cookies for the children's Sunday school, was clapping enthusiastically from her seat near the front. Mr. Patterson, who ran the hardware store and had donated some of the supplies I needed, gave me a thumbs up. People I barely knew were smiling at me, actually seeing me for the first time. I walked to the front on unsteady legs, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Pastor Thompson shook my hand warmly and gave me a framed certificate with my name written in elegant calligraphy. The stage spotlight swung toward me, its beam cutting through the dimness and pinning me in a circle of golden light that felt both like an embrace and an exposure. For exactly 43 seconds, I felt what it was like to be valued, to be recognized, to matter. I should have savored it longer. I should have known it would cost me everything. The car ride home was a study in tension. My father drove his pickup truck, the same one he had been driving for 15 years, now held together more by rust and prayers than actual structural integrity. My mother sat beside him in silence, her pearl necklace catching the streetlights as we passed. I sat in the back seat, the certificate carefully held in my lap, trying to preserve the moment of happiness for just a few minutes longer. Bella and Julian followed in his Mercedes, a sleek black vehicle that screamed money and prestige. I could see them in the side mirror, Bella's face illuminated by her phone screen, her expression unreadable. When we pulled into the driveway of our two-story colonial house, the one with the peeling paint my father kept promising to fix, but never did I felt the first real stirring of dread. The house looked exactly as it always had, but something felt different. The air felt heavier, charged with electricity before a storm. Julian's Mercedes pulled in behind us. Bella emerged first, her heels clicking on the driveway like gunshots. Julian followed, checking his expensive watch with the casual gesture of someone who had never worried about money a day in his life. Inside, my mother immediately went to the kitchen to put on coffee. My father headed to his armchair in the living room, the leather cracked and worn from years of use. I started toward the stairs, thinking I could escape to my small bedroom in the attic, but Bella's voice stopped me cold. "Don't you dare walk away from me." I turned, clutching my certificate a little tighter. Bella stood in the entrance to the living room, her beautiful face twisted with an emotion I had seen growing for years but never quite understood. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something darker, more corrosive. "Did you enjoy that?" Her voice was quiet, controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Did you enjoy being the center of attention, making me look like nothing in front of Julian's entire family?" I was confused. Julian's parents hadn't even been at the event. "What are you talking about?" "Julian's aunt was there," Bella hissed. "His Aunt Margaret, the one who sits on the board of the Croft Foundation, the one whose opinion actually matters. And what does she see? My pathetic little sister getting praised like she's something special while I sit there like a decorative plant." "I didn't ask for it," I said quietly. "Pastor Thompson just wanted to thank me for the work I did." "The work you did?" Bella's laugh was sharp and cruel. "You mean the work you were supposed to do quietly in the background where you belong? Do you know how embarrassing it is for me that my sister is a nobody who makes decorations for church fundraisers? Julian's last girlfriend came from the Ashford family. They have a mansion in Newport. Her sister is a curator at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And what do I have? A sister who plays with paper flowers and thinks she's an artist." Each word was a carefully aimed dart designed to wound. I had heard variations of this speech my entire life, but tonight felt different. Tonight there was a violence in her eyes that scared me. "Bella, that's enough," my mother said from the kitchen doorway, but her voice lacked conviction. She was holding a coffee cup, her knuckles white around the porcelain. "You're upset, but your sister didn't do anything wrong." "Didn't do anything wrong," Bella whirled on our mother. "She humiliated me. She made me look bad in front of people who matter. Everything I've worked for, every connection I've made, and she ruins it by reminding everyone that we're not actually sophisticated, we're just small-town people who fake it well enough to fool most people." "That's not fair," I whispered, but my voice was shaking. "I've never tried to embarrass you. I've spent my whole life trying to stay out of your way." "And you're terrible at it," Bella snapped. "You're always there, always lurking, always being the poor little saint who works so hard and never complains. It's pathetic." Julian appeared behind Bella, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, maybe we should go. Let everyone calm down." But Bella shrugged him off. "No, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of everyone acting like Clara is some kind of victim when she's been manipulating everyone her entire life." Manipulating. The word stung more than any physical blow could have. I had never manipulated anyone. I had spent 23 years of my life making myself as small and unobtrusive as possible, trying to earn love from people who seemed incapable of giving it. "Give me that," Bella demanded, gesturing at the certificate in my hands. "No," I said, surprising myself. It was the first time I had ever directly refused her anything. "Give it to me." "No." I held the certificate to my chest. "This is mine. I earned it." Bella lunged forward and snatched the certificate from my hands. I tried to hold on, but her grip was iron, fueled by years of rage. The certificate ripped in half with a sickening tear. Bella didn't stop. She kept tearing, shredding it into confetti that scattered across the floor. I dropped to my knees, desperately trying to gather the pieces. That's when Bella shoved me hard with both hands. I stumbled backward, my feet caught in the rug, and slammed into grandmother's glass cabinet. The one Mom treated like it was made of gold. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. I felt the impact first, then the pain sharp and immediate as glass rained down around me. A large shard sliced through the sleeve of my dress and into my arm, opening a gash that ran from just below my elbow almost to my wrist. Blood appeared immediately, shockingly red against my pale skin and cream dress. For a moment, nobody moved. I sat there on the floor surrounded by broken glass and fragments of my certificate blood dripping onto the hardwood floor my mother had made me clean that very morning. The pain was intense, but it was nothing compared to what happened next. My mother stepped forward, and for one brief, foolish moment, I thought she was coming to help me. Instead, she looked down at me with an expression I had seen 1,000 times but had never fully acknowledged. It was disgust, pure, undiluted disgust. "Look what you've done, Clara," she said, her voice cold and measured. "Grandmother's cabinet. The one thing in this house that had real value, and you destroyed it." I gasped, clutching my bleeding arm. Bella pushed me. "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to," my mother cut me off. "But somehow you're always at the center of every problem, aren't you? Always causing drama, always making things difficult." My father stood from his armchair, his face red with anger. His breath smelled like the whiskey he had been drinking before we left for the event, the same whiskey he drank every night and pretended he didn't. "Clean up this mess, immediately," he barked. "And for God's sake, bandage that arm before you ruin the floor. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get blood out of hardwood?" "I'm bleeding," I said stupidly, as if they couldn't see it. "Then stop getting blood everywhere and take care of it," my father growled. "Bella, you go upstairs with Julian. We can't have you upset before tomorrow's lunch with the Crofts. This is too important." Julian looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Maybe we should take Clara to the hospital," he suggested. "That looks deep." "She's fine," my mother said quickly. "Clara is always fine. She's just being dramatic." I sat there watching my family prioritize everything and everyone over me, and something inside me finally, irrevocably broke. It wasn't the pain in my arm, though, that was excruciating. It wasn't even the destroyed certificate or the shattered glass. It was the sudden, crystal-clear realization that I had spent 23 years trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a servant, a scapegoat, a convenient target for all their frustrations and disappointments. When things went well, I was invisible. When things went wrong, I was to blame. There was no scenario in which I could ever be enough. I pulled myself up slowly, glass crunching under my feet. Blood soaked through the makeshift pressure I was applying to my arm. Without a word, I walked to the kitchen, found the first aid kit under the sink, and began trying to clean and bandage my wound with shaking hands. No one came to help me. No one checked to see if I was okay. I could hear Bella and Julian going upstairs, my mother beginning to sweep up the glass, my father pouring another drink. The cut was deeper than I could properly treat on my own. It needed stitches. But I knew if I asked to go to the hospital, I would be told I was being dramatic, wasting money, making things difficult. So I did the best I could with butterfly bandages and gauze, wrapping my arm tightly and trying not to think about infection or permanent damage. That night, I lay in my attic bedroom and stared at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. My arm throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of what had happened. But my mind was racing, planning, calculating. I had $6,300 saved money I had hidden in a shoebox under my bed from various side jobs I had done over the years. Babysitting, tutoring, designing party invitations, any task people were willing to pay cash for that my parents wouldn't find out about and take. It wasn't much, but it was enough to leave. The question was whether I had the courage to actually do it. I thought about all the times I had made excuses for them. The times my mother had criticized my appearance, my clothes, my hair, telling me I would never find a husband if I didn't make more effort. The times my father had yelled at me for minor infractions while ignoring Bella's actual problematic behavior. The times Bella had blamed me for things she had done, and I had taken the punishment without complaint because it was easier than fighting. I thought about the birthday when I turned 16, when I had saved up to buy myself a small used laptop so I could take an online design course. Bella had wanted a new car, and when my parents couldn't afford the exact model she wanted, she had smashed my laptop in a fit of rage, claiming I was showing off. My parents had made me apologize to her for being insensitive. I thought about the time I had won a small scholarship for a design competition in high school, and my mother had thrown the award letter away because she said college would be wasted on me. "I should focus on finding a nice boy to marry," she had said. "Your sister is the one with ambition. You're just artsy," which is a polite way of saying unemployable. I thought about every Christmas where Bella got piles of expensive gifts while I got practical items like socks and dish towels. Every family photo where I was positioned in the back or cropped out entirely. Every conversation where my opinions were dismissed or ignored. Every sacrifice I had made that was expected rather than appreciated. And I realized that leaving wasn't just something I wanted to do. It was something I had to do if I wanted to survive. Not physically, though, I was beginning to wonder about that too, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I had to leave or I would disappear entirely consumed by trying to be whatever they needed me to be until there was nothing left of Clara. At 2 in the morning, I made my decision. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my important documents, the cash from my shoebox, and a few photos that actually included me smiling. I left behind everything they had given me, every gift that came with strings attached, every item that represented their control over my life. I crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The house was silent except for my father's snoring from the master bedroom. I paused at the door, looking back one last time at the place I had called home for over 2 decades. I felt no nostalgia, no second thoughts. I felt only relief. The October air was cold frost already forming on the grass. I wore my warmest coat, the one I had bought myself from a thrift store, and started walking. I didn't have a car. My parents had promised me I could use the second car when I turned 18, but that privilege was always given to Bella instead, even though she had her own vehicle. I walked for nearly an hour, my arm aching with every step before I found myself standing in front of Mrs. Henderson's small Cape Cod-style house. A single light was on in the kitchen, which seemed like a sign from the universe. I approached the door, my courage almost failing me. What if she sent me back? What if she called my parents? What if she thought I was overreacting? But I knocked anyway, 3 soft taps that seemed to echo in the quiet night. Mrs. Henderson opened the door in her bathrobe, her gray hair in rollers, her kind face creasing with concern when she saw me. "Clara, child, what are you doing here at this hour?" "I need help," I whispered, and my voice broke. "I can't go back there. Please, I just need somewhere to stay for a few days until I figure things out." Mrs. Henderson didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. She simply opened the door wider and said, "Come in, sweetheart. Let me see that arm." I broke down, then really broke down for the first time in years. Mrs. Henderson guided me to her kitchen table, the one covered with a cheerful yellow tablecloth, and carefully unwrapped my amateur bandaging job. She sucked in a sharp breath when she saw the wound. "This needs proper medical attention, Clara. This needs stitches." "I can't afford a hospital," I said through my tears. "And I can't let my parents find out where I am." Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment, studying me with eyes that saw far more than I had said. Then she nodded. "My son-in-law is a doctor. Let me call him. He'll come here off the record." Within an hour, Dr. Peter Jameson arrived with a medical bag and a kind, tired smile. He stitched my arm carefully while Mrs. Henderson held my other hand. 12 stitches, neat and precise. He gave me antibiotics and pain medication and didn't ask any questions I didn't want to answer. When he left, Mrs. Henderson made up the guest room for me, tucking sheets with lavender sachets into the corners. She brought me chamomile tea and homemade cookies and sat with me while I cried out years of accumulated pain. Sometimes, she said softly when my sobs finally quieted, "The place we call home is the most dangerous place we can be, and sometimes leaving is the bravest thing we can do. You can stay here as long as you need Clara." New questions asked, new strings attached. The next morning, I woke up in an unfamiliar bed, sunlight streaming through lace curtains, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My arm hurt, my eyes were swollen from crying, and I had no idea what came next. But for the first time in my life, I didn't wake up dreading the day ahead. Mrs. Henderson made me breakfast, real breakfast with eggs and toast and fresh orange juice, and we sat at her kitchen table making plans. She knew the owner of an artisan coffee shop called the Copper Kettle in the next town, over a 40-minute bus ride away. Far enough that I wouldn't run into my family, but close enough that I could build a new life. The owner's name was Margaret Winters, and she was a force of nature. At 57, she had opened the Copper Kettle 15 years earlier after leaving an abusive marriage with nothing but her grandmother's copper kettle and a determination to never depend on anyone again. Mrs. Henderson called her, explained that she had a young woman who was talented and hardworking and needed a fresh start, and Margaret agreed to meet me that afternoon. I wore my best interview outfit, a simple black dress I had made myself, and tried to hide the bandage on my arm under a cardigan. Margaret took one look at me and seemed to understand everything I wasn't saying. "Mrs. Henderson says you have an eye for design," she said, leaning against the counter of her shop. The space was nice but dated, with mismatched furniture and walls that hadn't been painted in years. "Show me." I pulled out my phone and showed her photos of events I had designed, the church fundraiser being the most recent. I showed her sketches I had made, ideas for improving spaces on tight budgets, before and after photos from small projects I had completed. Margaret studied each image, carefully zooming in on details, asking questions about my process, my choices, my inspirations. After 20 minutes, she nodded. I'll hire you as a server to start. Minimum wage plus tips, which aren't great, honestly. The shop is struggling. But if you can help me redesign this place and bring in more customers, we can talk about a raise and a promotion. Deal. Deal, I said, relief flooding through me. I started the next day working the morning shift from 6 to 2. The work was hard, my feet ached, and my arm was still healing. But every day I wasn't in my parents' house was a gift. I served coffee and pastries, learned to work the espresso machine, memorized regular customers' orders, and in my spare moments I sketched ideas for improving the shop. Margaret gave me a small budget, mostly for paint and some secondhand furniture. I spent my evenings scouring thrift stores and estate sales, finding hidden treasures. A vintage mirror that just needed cleaning. Mismatched chairs that looked intentionally eclectic once I painted them coordinating colors. Old windows I turned into wall art. Books I arranged by color to create an eye-catching display. I painted the walls a warm cream color, hung string lights, created a chalkboard menu that I updated daily with small illustrations. I brought in plants, lots of plants from cuttings I propagated myself. I made the shop feel like a cozy living room where people wanted to linger. Within 3 weeks, business had noticeably improved. Customers who had been coming for years complimented the new atmosphere. New customers came in because they saw the attractive window displays I created, rotating them weekly to stay fresh. Margaret started staying in the black instead of the red, and she kept her promise. She gave me a raise and promoted me to assistant manager. During this time, my family called and texted constantly. At first, the messages were angry, demanding I come home immediately. Then they became worried, claiming they were concerned about my safety. Then they became manipulative, telling me how much I had hurt them, how ungrateful I was. I didn't respond to any of it. I blocked their numbers and focused on building my new life. Mrs. Henderson helped me find a small studio apartment above a bookstore. It was tiny, barely 400 square feet, but it had big windows that let in beautiful morning light, exposed brick walls, and it was mine. I furnished it slowly with thrift store finds I refurbished myself. A table I painted teal. Chairs I reupholstered with fabric from the clearance bin. Shelves I built from reclaimed wood. For the first time in my life, I was creating a space that reflected who I was, not who someone else wanted me to be. I filled it with plants and books and art supplies. I painted the walls, colors I loved. I made it a sanctuary. I also started taking care of myself in ways I never had before. I went to the doctor for a proper checkup and learned I was anemic and vitamin D deficient, probably from years of stress and poor nutrition. I started eating regular healthy meals instead of whatever scraps were left after everyone else ate. I began sleeping through the night without waking up in anxiety about what I had done wrong or what was expected of me. The scar on my arm healed into a thin white line, a permanent reminder of that night and the decision I had made. 6 months passed. Fall turned to winter, then winter melted into spring. The copper kettle was thriving, largely due to the changes I had implemented. Margaret had given me more responsibility, and I was now managing all the visual elements of the shop, including designing promotional materials, creating seasonal displays, and planning special events. We had started hosting poetry readings on Thursday nights, art shows on Saturdays, and Sunday morning acoustic music sessions. The shop had become a community hub, a place where artists and writers and musicians gathered. It was exactly the kind of place I had always dreamed of creating. I had also made friends, real friends, for the first time in my life. Sarah was a potter who showed her work at our Saturday art shows. James was a musician who performed original songs on Sundays. Rachel worked at the bookstore below my apartment and shared my love of mystery novels. They were people who liked me for who I was, not what I could do for them. Then on a Tuesday afternoon in early May, Bella walked into the copper kettle. I was arranging flowers for a wedding reception we were hosting that weekend, carefully placing white peonies and greenery in mason jars. I heard the bell above the door chime and looked up, automatically, my customer service smile already in place. The smile died when I saw who it was. Bella looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was limp and unstyled. She had lost weight enough that her expensive clothes hung loose on her frame. The bags under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well, but it was her expression that shocked me most. The arrogance, the cruelty, the superiority that had always characterized her face were gone, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. "Clara," she said, her voice hoarse, "I need to talk to you." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse to call security to protect myself. But Margaret was watching from behind the counter with concern, and I didn't want to cause a scene. "We can talk in the alley," I said quietly. I set down the flowers and led her through the back door into the narrow alley behind the shop. The May air was warm and sweet, flowering trees blooming in nearby yards, birds singing their afternoon songs. The contrast between the beautiful day and the tension of this moment was jarring. Bella leaned against the brick wall, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. Julian broke off our engagement, she said, without preamble. I waited, saying nothing. I had learned that silence was a powerful tool, and I wasn't going to make this easier for her. His family heard things. Rumors about our family being unstable, about violence, about problems. She laughed bitterly. Turns out the Crofts have standards. Who knew? What do you want from me, Bella? I need you to come back. I need you to talk to them, to tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that we're a normal, happy family, that whatever they heard was exaggerated or false. I stared at her, genuinely amazed by her audacity. You pushed me into a glass cabinet. You shredded my certificate. Mom and Dad left me bleeding on the floor and told me to clean it up. And you want me to tell people we're a happy family. It was an accident, Bella protested weakly. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. You've been hurting me my entire life, I said, my voice calm but firm. Maybe not always physically, but emotionally, psychologically, constantly. And our parents let you, encouraged you, joined you. I'm not going to lie for you, Bella. I'm not going to be your prop in the performance of your perfect life. Please, Bella whispered, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. Real tears, not the manipulative ones she could produce on command. I have nothing left. Julian was everything. The wedding was planned, the deposits paid, the future secured. Without him, I'm just another woman with a college degree she's done nothing with and no prospects. Then figure out who you want to be without him, I said. It's what I had to do without all of you. You don't understand. It's different for me. I was supposed to marry well, that was always the plan. I was supposed to save this family from Dad's failures and Mom's social climbing. You gotta be the artist, the creative one, no expectations. I had to be perfect. Her words stunned me. You think I had no expectations, Bella? I had to be invisible. I had to be the emotional support for everyone else while getting none myself. I had to watch you get everything while I got scraps. And when I finally did something good enough to be noticed, you destroyed it and injured me because you couldn't stand seeing me happy for 5 minutes. Bella wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. What am I supposed to do? What I did, I said quietly. Build a life that's actually yours. Stop trying to be what other people want and figure out what you want. Get therapy. Make real friends. Find actual purpose. But don't come to me looking for salvation because I'm not your savior. I'm the sister you tried to destroy, and I'm done. You're really not going to help me, her voice was small, shocked. I already helped you by leaving. Because now you can't blame me anymore. Whatever happens now is your responsibility. I turned and walked back into the shop, leaving Bella standing in the alley. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but I felt something unexpected. Not guilt, not satisfaction, just a calm certainty that I had done the right thing. Margaret met me at the door, concern written across her face. You okay? I will be, I said, and I meant it. But my family's problems were just beginning. Over the next few weeks, I heard through Mrs. Henderson, who still attended the church and couldn't help overhearing gossip, that things were falling apart for them. My father's woodworking business, Richard Miller Fine Carpentry, was collapsing. He had always been a skilled craftsman, but a terrible businessman, relying entirely on my mother's social connections and Bella's engagement to the Crofts to secure high-end clients. With Bella's scandal, those connections evaporated. The wealthy clients who had commissioned custom cabinets and furniture began canceling their orders, claiming scheduling conflicts or budget concerns. But everyone knew the truth. They didn't want to be associated with a family that had problems, that wasn't actually perfect, that had cracks in its polished facade. My father, unable to cope with the stress and loss of prestige, started drinking more heavily. His craftsmanship, once his only reliable trait, began to suffer. He missed deadlines, made mistakes, alienated the few clients who remained. Then came the accident that sealed their fate. Richard had been working on a massive order for a hotel chain, custom headboards, for 200 rooms. It was the biggest contract he had ever landed, secured back when Bella was still engaged and the family name still meant something. The contract was worth over $100,000, with a 50% deposit paid up front. One night, drunk and furious about his life falling apart, Richard had gone to the workshop alone. Exactly what happened was unclear, but the result was devastating. He had somehow knocked over a space heater, which started a fire that destroyed not only all the completed headboards, but also damaged several expensive pieces of equipment and tools. The hotel chain's insurance company determined it was negligence, which meant his liability insurance wouldn't cover it. They sued for breach of contract and damages. Richard faced a lawsuit for over $200,000, money he absolutely did not have. The house already mortgaged to the hilt to fund Bella's wedding preparations and maintain their upper-middle-class lifestyle was at risk. The business was finished. And without the business or the house, they had nothing. My parents had never saved money, always spending to maintain appearances rather than building security. I heard all this through the grapevine and felt oddly detached from it. These were the consequences of their choices, their priorities, their values. They had built their entire life on a foundation of appearances, social climbing, and maintaining a perfect facade. When that facade cracked, everything crumbled. But I was unprepared for the phone call that came 3 months after Bella had visited the shop. I was at home on a Sunday morning, my only day off, drinking coffee and reading a book in the pool of sunlight that came through my windows. My blocked numbers couldn't leave voicemails, but somehow my mother had found a way to contact me through the church's emergency prayer chain, which I hadn't thought to remove myself from. The message was brief, my mother's voice barely recognizable through her tears. "Clara, it's Mom. Please, we need you. Your father had an accident. We're going to lose everything. The house, the business, everything. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please call me." I listened to the message 3 times, studying my reactions. I waited for guilt to crash over me, for the old programming to kick in that said good daughters help their families no matter what. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a clinical sort of curiosity about what they expected from me now. I called Mrs. Henderson, who gave me the full story. The lawsuit, the impending foreclosure, my father's drinking, my mother's breakdown, Bella moving back home and being unable to find work because her only skills were looking pretty and social manipulation. They were truly catastrophically falling apart. "What do you want to do?" Mrs. Henderson asked me gently. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to let them face the consequences, but part of me remembers being that girl who just wanted them to love her. "You're not that girl anymore," Mrs. Henderson said. "You're the woman who built a life from nothing. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not for them." I thought about it for 2 days. I talked to Margaret, who had become a mentor to me. I talked to my friends. I even talked to Dr. Jameson, who Mrs. Henderson had introduced me to properly, and who had become like a kind uncle figure. Finally, I made my decision. I would meet with them, but on my terms, at a place of my choosing, and I would offer them a solution, but not the one they expected. I called my mother back from a new number I had gotten specifically for this purpose. "I'll meet you at the workshop," I said. "Tuesday at noon. Don't be late." The day felt surreal. I dressed carefully in professional clothes, like I was going to a business meeting rather than a family confrontation. In a way, I was. I drove the used Honda Civic I had recently bought, my first car, paid for entirely by myself with money I had saved. Margaret came with me for support, waiting in the car while I went inside. The workshop was worse than I had imagined. The fire damage was evident, charred wood and melted equipment, but beyond that there was an air of neglect and abandonment. Dust covered everything, tools lay scattered and rust-covered, and the whole place smelled like failure and decay. My family was already there waiting. My father sat on a stool near his ruined workbench, looking 20 years older than when I had last seen him. His hands shook and his eyes were bloodshot. My mother stood nearby, her usually perfect appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and hair that clearly hadn't been professionally styled in months. Bella lurked in the corner, looking like a ghost of her former self. They all turned when I entered, and I saw something in their faces I had never seen before. Fear. They were genuinely afraid of me, of what I might do or refuse to do. The power dynamic had completely shifted. "Clara," my mother started, but I held up my hand. "Let me speak first," I said. "I didn't come here to listen to apologies or excuses. I came here to present you with an option." I set my briefcase on the least dusty surface I could find and pulled out a folder of documents. Over the past few days, I had done something they would never have expected from quiet, submissive Clara. I had researched their situation thoroughly. I had looked into their debts, their assets, their options, and I had found a solution, but not the salvation they were hoping for. "I know about all of Dad's debts," I started. "I know about the lawsuit, the mortgage, the credit card bills, all of it. I also know," I continued, looking directly at my father, "that you took out several small loans in my name 2 years ago without my knowledge or permission." The color drained from my father's face. "Clara, That's fraud," I continued calmly. "Identity theft. I could press charges. I could sue you. I could make your situation significantly worse." The silence was absolute. Even Bella looked shocked. "But I'm not going to do that," I said. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you on the street. so I'm going to offer you one option. Take it or leave it, but this is the only offer you'll get. I pulled out the contract I had prepared with the help of a lawyer Margaret had connected me with. Margaret Winters, my employer, is looking to expand her business. She wants to start a line of handcrafted furniture for a chain of artisan cafes she's planning. She's willing to buy this workshop all the equipment that's salvageable and the rights to the business name. The offer is for $75,000. It was, I knew, significantly less than the workshop's value before the fire, but in its current state with the lawsuit hanging over it, it was more than fair. That's not enough, my father mumbled. The lawsuit alone is for twice that. I know, I said. But the lawsuit is for damages and breach of contract. If you declare bankruptcy, which you'll have to do, a lot of that will be discharged. The $75,000 will let you settle with the hotel chain for pennies on the dollar, pay off the most pressing debts, and have enough left over for first and last month's rent on a modest apartment and some living expenses while you figure out what comes next. My mother was crying silently. What about the house? The house is gone, I said, not without sympathy but with honesty. The mortgage is too far in arrears. It's going to foreclosure no matter what, but this way you'll have something. A fresh start if you actually want it. There was a long pause. Bella spoke for the first time, her voice hollow. Why are you helping us at all? Because, I said, looking at each of them, I'm not like you. I don't want revenge. I don't get satisfaction from watching people suffer, even people who hurt me. I just want to move on with my life, and I can't do that if I'm worried you're living under a bridge somewhere. There's one condition, I added. The contract includes a permanent no-contact clause. You take this deal, you get enough money to start over, but you agree to never contact me again. No calls, no texts, no letters, no showing up at my workplace or home. You leave me alone permanently. You can't do that, my mother whispered. You can't buy your way out of being our daughter. I'm not buying anything, I said. I'm setting a boundary. I'm offering you help with the understanding that our relationship, such as it was, ends here. You can take the deal or refuse it. That's your choice. But if you refuse, I walk away and you get nothing from me. Not help, not money, not sympathy. Nothing. I set the contract on the workbench and placed a pen beside it. You have until the end of the business day to decide. The lawyer's contact information is on the front page. Margaret is willing to close within a week if you agree. I started to walk toward the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, I really did love you. All of you. I spent my whole life trying to earn your love back, but I finally realized something. You don't know how to love anyone, even each other. You only know how to use people, and I'm done being used. I walked out of that workshop and didn't look back. Margaret was waiting in the car, studying my face carefully when I got in. How do you feel? Free, I said, and it was true. Offering them help on my terms with clear boundaries felt powerful in a way that either pure revenge or pure forgiveness wouldn't have. I was taking control of my own story, writing my own ending. They signed the contract that same day. The lawyer called me at 5 p.m. to confirm. The sale closed the following week. True to my word, the money was enough to settle the lawsuit, discharge the most problematic debts through bankruptcy, and give them a modest cushion to start over. I never heard from them again. Not because they didn't try, I later learned, but because my boundaries held. When they called, the numbers were blocked. When they showed up at the coffee shop, security Margaret had hired politely but firmly turned them away. When they tried to send letters, I returned them unopened. I had meant what I said. I was done. And this time I had the resources and support to maintain that boundary. 1 year later, I stood in what used to be my father's woodworking shop, now transformed into a bright, beautiful, creative space. Margaret had retired and sold me the coffee shop, which I had renamed the Artisan's Corner. It had become a beloved community gathering place, featuring local art hosting workshops and serving as a venue for weddings and events. The old workshop now produced handcrafted furniture for my growing cafe chain, while also serving as a design studio where I taught evening classes to young people who wanted to learn about interior decorating and event planning. I had bought the building and turned it into something good, something healing. On this particular morning, I was arranging white lilies in a ceramic vase I had made myself. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the space I had created from the ashes of my old life. Mrs. Henderson walked in now, my business advisor and the closest thing to family I had. You see, she said with a warm smile, some things aren't meant to be thrown away when they break. They're meant to be transformed into something new and more beautiful. I smiled back, looking around at the life I had built. Not the life anyone had planned for me, not the life my family had expected, but mine. I had found my own light, not borrowed, not stolen, but earned through pain and courage and the decision to value myself even when no one else would. I had won not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy me any longer. The scars on my arm had faded to thin white lines, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. But they reminded me every day of the night I chose myself, the night I walked away from people who couldn't love me the way I deserved. And every morning when I opened the doors to my cafe, when I welcomed people into the space I had created, I knew I had made the right choice. Because at the end of the day, the only approval I needed was my own. Some people will never see your worth, and that's okay. Your job isn't to convince them. Your job is to walk away and build a life so beautiful that their absence becomes a blessing rather than a loss. Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever been the scapegoat in your own family? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength in the hardest moments. Remember, you're not alone and your story matters.